Hey everyone, it's 10 Types, and today I'm talking about Pokemon TCG Pocket some more, talking about Genetic Apex and the not Genetic Apex cards. I briefly talked about them, reviewing every card from Pokemon TCG Pocket, except I missed some. I obviously haven't played the game yet. If you don't know, I live in the US. But, Pokemon TCG Pocket is out in New Zealand, so we have seen all the cards. I just didn't see a list of all the cards that weren't from Genetic Apex, which is the set, or three different sets. It's a little weird. Each like pack has different exclusive cards, but it is one set. But anyways, there are some trainers in the set, but then the more important trainers, I believe, at least for general play, are separate. I'm not going to talk about this Pikachu. Obviously, nothing super special going on here, but there are 7 trainers which are pretty interesting, which we need to talk about. Then there are there's a bunch of supporters from the set as well as 3 items. The items from the set Genetic Apex. So the items here are all fossil. Well, the one's called Old Amber, but they're all essentially fossils. They all have outside of their name the same exact text, and you can only play 2 of each card as well. Keep that in mind. 20 card decks. So they have 40 HP on play. They are played like Pokemon, basic colorless Pokemon, as a 40 HP, which is really low. I'm pretty sure that's like lower than anything else in the game. I know there are some 40 HP Pokemon. No, that's not lower than everything else, but that's lower than pretty much everything else. So HP wise, really terrible. You cannot retreat. At any time during your turn, you can discard this from play. The value here, one is like kind of a pivot, something that you can switch out. It essentially like kind of has free retreat, but then you lose it from play entirely. But the idea would be, obviously, if you're playing the evolutions, they are like basic Pokemon that evolve, then you just play these. But if you're not playing evolutions, then the evolutions, you could just play this to maybe take a hit if your opponent's doing 30 damage or less. Then you can discard that and essentially like heal off the damage. It's not particularly useful, but it is one thing to keep in mind that could be solid, but again, you can't attack, and it's not a great card, but keep in mind you could do that for any of those 3, and there is that value, but Aerodactyl is also colorless. I mean, the what's the ability on the Omastar? I don't. Oh no, it doesn't have an ability. So yeah, the other ones don't have abilities. I don't think, unless no, none of them have abilities. But the where's it? I lost it. The Aerodactyl is colorless. It's not like a great card. It's an okay card, I feel like. So you could put that into various decks, but the fossils are item cards. They're the only item cards in the Genetic Apex expansion. So just keep that in mind. Then we have some supporters. We got Erica, which heals grass Pokemon, heals 50, which is quite strong, I think. I'll be talking about each type individually, so in those type breakdown videos, I'll be talking about these supporters more. Misty helps water Pokemon and is nice, and you definitely want to be playing Misty in any water deck, though it's not like insanely good. It's okay though. Blaine, there's like a deck and some cards that this helps, which is it's a good supporter. Koga is going to be helping out some Darkness Pokemon, the Muck and the Weezing, specifically for like a combo. It has a few solid uses though. Giovanni is a supporter that we're going to talk about here. Same with Sabrina, though, which can be played in every deck. I'll talk about how good I think they are. And then you got Brock, which says take a fighting energy, accelerates to Golem or Onyx, good with those 2 cards. Although I think Brock's one of the weaker supporters if I had to guess. We'll see. Then Lieutenant Surge lets you move all lightning energies from your bench Pokemon to your Raichu, Electrode, or Electabuzz in the active. Kind of fun. I feel like it's a little bit gimmicky, but it is specifically good for the Raichu because of just how that card works. And there's a combo with Magneton as well, but again, we'll break that down in the lightning video. Giovanni, though, says it's a supporter card. You can only play 1 supporter each turn. But the turns, if you're familiar with like regular Pokemon TCG, the turns are pretty short, but the amount of turns, there's a lot of turns, so you can definitely play. It's not like, so what you do 10 more damage to your opponent's active this turn, and this is solid. Obviously, it's not like stacking with, I mean, you can't play 2 of this, but it's a solid supporter. Comparing it to like Blaine, which does 30 more, Blaine's really good. Giovanni, 10 more is okay. It's a one-time use thing, so how useful is this? It can push you over breakpoints. I'm not so familiar with what those are right now. You might find that some decks really want Giovanni to push you over that to get 10 more damage, and I feel like supporters are supposed to be stronger than items, and they are a little bit stronger, but keep in mind that you can only play 1 per turn, so you want a few supporters in your deck, but Giovanni might not be one of those supporters that you want. It's certainly a solid supporter, but I feel like it's weaker just because it's not a ton of damage. I mean, it's only 10, but there are definitely games when this can win you the game, especially if you can play back-to-back Giovannis and do 20 extra damage throughout the course of 2 turns, plus, of course, your attacks. This is solid. I kind of like it with the Meowth, which is a, when I talk about Colorless Pokemon, I'm going to talk about Meowth, which I think is theoretically really good with the attack Payday, where you do some damage, 10, but you need to be doing some damage to get value off of the Giovanni, and then you can also use Payday to draw yourself a card, which again is really nice to get you set up. We'll talk about drawing cards and searching cards later on, but it's really strong. And there's also the supporter card Sabrina. This is the other one in the expansion that is universally playable. You could technically put any of them in your deck, I'm pretty sure, but they might not do anything. So Sabrina here, and I imagine you'll be playing like one of these other supporters, 2 copies of one of these supporters. You're probably not playing multiple in the same deck. I feel like playing dual type decks is kind of sketchy. It's not like you can't, but once you start playing these, you are very much committed to playing a dual type deck. So Sabrina here, switch out your opponent's active to the bench, and your opponent chooses the new Pokemon. This supporter is very solid. So there's something called gusting in the Pokemon TCG. If you're not familiar, where you switch one of your opponent's bench to the active, that's generally where you choose. This you do not choose, but it is a solid card. There are some cards with similar effects. There's Pidgeot, which is certainly all right. You can do it every turn. And there's Victory Bell, which gives you more control, but only brings up basic Pokemon. But that's a very good card as well. But you're not always playing those cards. Sabrina, I think, is a very strong supporter for specifically finishing out games. So when we're talking about points, you need 3 points to win, and there are Pokemon that give up 1 point, of course, but then there are some that give up 2. And for those Pokemon, you're looking at, like, let's say this Wigglytuff EX here. This card, it has a decent amount of HP. Look at like the single point Wigglytuff, you have 100 HP, which is 40 less. So if you have already knocked out one Pokemon EX, you've taken 2 points, you just need 1 more. So if you knock out another EX, essentially you're wasting damage, you're doing more than you have to. So in order to counteract that, you can play Sabrina, force your opponent's Wigglytuff EX to the bench, and they send up a single point Pokemon, and then you can hopefully maybe one-shot that, versus you might not be able to with Wigglytuff EX. Of course, if you're not one-shotting, then they'll just retreat that Pokemon into the Wigglytuff EX, and now you need to do extra turns to knock out the Wigglytuff EX. You just kind of waste a turn. So Sabrina, I think, is specifically good with decks where you're hitting a good chunk of damage, but not enough to knock out your like super strong Pokemon. Maybe with the Pokemon like, let's see, doubles hitting 80 here. I feel like 80 to that like low 100s range. 70 feels a little low, but like maybe Pidgeot. Then you certainly have Pokemon like this Melmetal. Melmetal's knocking out a lot of Pokemon, but not all Pokemon. So you have Sabrina, which will send your opponent's active to the bench. Then you can essentially guarantee take a knockout, hopefully. But then if you're playing against decks, you need to be very considerate of Sabrina. And if your opponent is going to be going for this plan where you have like where they're trying to go around your very tanky active Pokemon, tanky with like lots of health, potentially damage reduction, things like that. And then you also want to put tanky Pokemon on your bench. So keep that in mind. You only have 3 bench slots, so use them wisely. But in terms of abilities, most Pokemon on your bench aren't providing like a ton of value with their abilities, most likely. So you want, if you're playing say Pikachu EX, you want both Pikachu EX in play. They're not, the tankiest Pokemon, but they have solid amounts of tankiness. If you have a Pokemon like Melmetal, which I was just talking about, you might want to evolve your Meltan into a Melmetal prematurely. Yes, you cannot use a mass, and then you might be stuck in the active if your opponent plays Sabrina, but at least they're not taking a prize card there, which can be what you're looking for. So I think just keep that in mind. I think Sabrina will be one of the most important supporters in the game, and a card that is something you need to watch out for, something that I'd recommend you play 2 copies of in every single deck that you can as well. It's a very solid supporter. Then we have the starting trainers, and we have one supporter, which is Professor's Research, which has the subtext Professor Oak. Also, I don't know, like some of the tracing around the word supporter in Professor Oak, it looks kind of bad. Not entirely sure why that is. But anyways, Professor's Research, just drawing you 2 cards. This is a very solid supporter, just increasing your hand size by 1. And also doing something called essentially deck thinning, which means, you have a 20 card deck, but there are cards that you're really looking for. You have your main attacker and stuff like that. So Professor's Oak replaces itself and essentially means that you're playing with like less cards in your deck. This card's just to fill a card that gets essentially skipped by, but you are using your supporter for the turn to do so. Keep in mind it does grow your hand up by one card, meaning that you might be pushing the hand limit. So if you find yourselves having issues with the hand limit, then Professor's Research will not be a good card because it just kind of doesn't do anything. It might get you to the hand limit faster, which might help you, but probably won't. So Professor's Research might not be what you're looking for in every deck. But in a lot of decks, I think it's good, and you should probably play it unless you're finding that you're really having issues with deck space. But keep in mind, you only are getting a few Pokemon knocked out throughout the course of the game. You don't need more than, like, say, 6 basic Pokemon in your deck, I feel like, because if 3 of them are knocked out, you lose. So just keep that in mind. Of course, if you have 6 Pokemon and they're all stage 2s, that's like your entire deck. So, which I would not recommend, by the way. But there are some stage 2s that are very strong, which specifically the grass ones you might want to, you might want some like combo stuff there. But in Professor's Research, I think will be a good inclusion in most decks as playing 2 copies to just let you draw through your deck faster. Specifically in decks where you don't have lots of other supporters you want to play. If you're for whatever reason playing a deck where you have, Sabrina, 2 Sabrinas, 2 Giovannis, and then like 2 Misty, 2 Blaine, or something weird like that. That's 8 supporters. You're probably not going to be playing Professor's Research at that point, especially because you play um, the what is it? You get to play like lots of different Pokemon. So then that's kind of weird. You might not have room in your deck for Professor's Research and might not. You might want to play other supporters, but it's still a very good card. It's definitely a supporter. I think it's if you play standard, Professor's Research is one of the staple supporters. Sabrina is like Boss's Orders, which is kind of weird. Like, why is this not Giovanni? But whatever. Sabrina, though, is definitely going to be a staple supporter. Sabrina and Professor Oak are the ones that you want to be putting in most decks, I gotta assume. Then we have some items, and there are some kind of weird ones here. We have Hand Scope, which says your opponent reveals their hand. This is solid. Not entirely sure how useful this is. It's a pretty skill-based card, one of the most, I guess, like skill cards that we've seen so far, because obviously if you kind of know what your opponent could be running and have some idea, knowing what exactly is in their hand can be super useful because now you know what they have, what they don't have access to specifically as well, and kind of what their game plan is. If they're bluffing, you could be bluffing. You could, like, say, attach a bunch of energies to a basic, and then your opponent's like, oh no, they're going to evolve it. But you play hand scope, you know that they don't have the evolution, so you can kind of, fake. You can like ignore bluffs for that matter with hand scope. Does it provide enough value? I'm not really sure, to be honest. It's a weird card. I don't actually know why it's in the game. Like, it's not a bad card, and it adds a layer of skill, but also, I mean, I don't know. I think it's kind of a weird card to see in Pocket. Like, it's very anti-Pocket. I feel like it's like Pocket's supposed to be this like quick, simple game, and it's like not that. But anyways, Handscope is definitely a solid card. If you want it, it's a card that I'd say you could play or not play. It's completely up to you. I mean, that's true of any card. Obviously, if it's in your collection when it comes out in like a month. But Handscope here is going to be an item that I'd say is completely like you might like it, you might not like it. So that's just completely up to you. Then there is the other item, Pokédex, which is look at the top 3 cards of your deck. This is kind of interesting. It obviously gives you knowledge of what's coming, but how useful is this? Again, it's kind of like similar idea to Handscope, but it lets you plan out stuff, and your opponent will know that you have Pokédex. So when you play it, so they'll be like, oh, they Pokédex now. They kind of know what they're building towards or what they're not building towards. I don't believe cards shuffle your deck. Like there's a Weedle. Let me find this Weedle. Or is it Weedle? No, Caterpie. Put a random grass Pokemon from your deck into your hand, but you do not shuffle your deck. So even if you use that, you'll pretty much know what you're still drawing into. Theoretically, you could get one of those top 3 cards, though. I'm not exactly sure how that works. But anyways, Pokédex here is a solid item. Again, if you want it, I feel like it's one of those items which is like, you don't need it. It could provide value, but it's a solid item card. Then we have Red Card. This one's pretty crazy. This most of these cards are weaker than normal Pokemon cards. This one is not. Well, it's weird, but item card, you can play as close as many items as you want. Your opponent shuffles their hand into their deck and draws 3 cards. This actually has synergy with Handscope. If you know what's in your opponent's hand, you can be like, oh, they have a really good hand, then I'm going to red card them, or they don't have a good hand, I'm not going to red card them. So that is some simple synergy there. Red card, though, could be really detrimental to your opponent if they have a really big hand and they have lots of things they want to do. This specifically is a card where it's like, don't hold all the cards in your hand that you might want for later because there is a form of hand disruption. This will be, messing with your hand and making it smaller, and now you can't do everything you want to do. But I think red card it's a solid item card. If you feel confident on your ability to kind of predict what your opponent has in their hand and like figure that out just through guessing and what they're playing and stuff like that, then red card could be insane, but that's really hard to do. But I definitely think red card is a solid item, a similar vein as hand scope and Pokédex. You can play it if you want, if you feel like it's a card you like, but don't play it if you don't want to. Though I do think it is definitely better than hand scope and Pokédex and has direct synergy with hand scope. Then we have what I consider the three main items. The main one is going to be Pokeball here. Put a random basic Pokemon from your deck into your hand. This is a card that I feel like you should play in like every deck. It's the only way to search out Pokemon from your deck. Obviously, it doesn't guarantee you get the card you want unless you just play a very small amount of basics. But Pokeball is definitely going to be a great card in pretty much every deck, I gotta assume. Unless you have a deck where it's like very evolution focused, which case you might not need this card, but it is still good. It does kind of replace itself. You don't lose if you run out of cards in deck. I'm 90% sure, but you can run into hand limit issues. It like replaces itself, so this isn't changing your hand size when you play it. Actually, I don't know what happens if you don't have basic Pokemon in hand or in deck when you play this card. Don't know if it will do anything. I'm not really sure, but anyways, Pokeball is definitely a solid item card that I would highly recommend you play in every deck as a 2 of. Then we have Potion, heal 20 from one of your Pokemon. This card seems very solid. I think Erica's one of the stronger supporters. I mean, the type-specific supporters all have they're kind of weird. Erica's the most simple, so it like seems like pretty clearly has good value. And the Pokemon that you'll be healing with Erica, I think, are pretty strong as well. But Potion has some similar values if you're playing a deck like I don't know. I might be playing when again things could change by the time the actual game comes out. But based on these cards, I think I want to play a water-based deck, which obviously can't use Erica, with Vaporeon for self-healing and tankiness, as well as Greninja. Where's Greninja? Greninja's down here with its ability to place 20 damage counters or 20 damage on one of your opponent's Pokemon, and with your ability. So you are doing a good chunk of damage every turn and putting it where you want it. There are other good cards like Articuno and Articuno EX. I don't know if Articuno's that good, but certainly Articuno EX would be a nice inclusion if I'm able to get that. There are other cool cards. Seadra, I think, is also a pretty solid card with Greninja, but with Vaporeon specifically, you're healing 30, you have 130 HP, which is not bad at all. It's certainly pretty solid, and then you could be healing 50 each turn if you are playing, or you could even heal 71 turn by playing double potion, and then also using your attack. So Potion is a very solid card. It's not necessarily something you'll be wanting to play in every deck. It just depends on your style of deck. If you're a deck that is low HP, fast games, where if your opponent really gets set up, then you might not be in a good position. You might just lose from that point. Then Potion doesn't really provide any value. Those are decks that are like kind of turbo or aggro decks if you're familiar with the Magic. Well, I'm not that familiar. I was going to say they're like red decks, but I'm not familiar enough with Magic. But if you have a deck that's like lots of basic Pokemon, lower energy costs, things like that, you're attacking turn 1, turn 2, then your goal is going to be probably not to play Potion, and you're just going to outspeed your opponent and win the game that way. But if you're playing a deck like the grass decks, most of the grass decks, it depends exactly what you're playing, but with like Venusaur, Butterfree, then you want to be playing Potion, presumably. I mean, you have Erica, but you're probably also playing Potion to get tons of healing, and your opponent is going to struggle to knock you out, and you're going to slow the game down and do continuous damage to your opponent, and they won't ever be able to win the game because they won't be able to knock out your Pokemon. It's what's considered a stall strategy. You're slowing the game down for your opponent. You're just making it so they can't knock you out. So Potion is good for that, but if you're playing, as I said, like fast decks, even if you're playing like middle speed decks, I feel like Potion could be okay. That would then become a card that's like, oh, if I like Potion, I'll play Potion. If I don't like Potion, I won't play Potion. Just like these other items here. X Speed is a pretty interesting item card. It says during this turn, the 2 cost of your active Pokemon is one less. Yeah, one colorless, but that's pretty good. This is something I really am not sure how good it is. It seems good. A lot of the Pokemon in the game have 1 retreat. Oh, Dodrio has free retreat. I did not realize that. That's kind of cool. But if you're playing something like, say, Meowth or Farfetch'd or something, actually Meowth was a terrible example. What's an actual good example? I don't know, but you have maybe some Pokemon with 2 retreat and 1 attack. Yeah, I can't really find any of these, but if you have a Pokemon that's 2 retreat, 1 attack cost, then you can go ahead and you can play Weezing. I think the item card stacks, so you can play Weezing, you play 2 of that X speed card, then all of a sudden you're able to retreat. Same thing with like Grimer. You can retreat easier without having to commit as many resources to the Pokemon to retreat, which is really useful. It's definitely a card that I think will be a solid card. Not exactly sure how good it will be, but I do think it is a solid card. Looking at the cards and just like what they are, a lot of them it doesn't seem super useful particularly. Like a lot of the Pokemon have, if they have all the energy that they need. Okay, here we go. We got Geodude. This one has 2 retreat costs, but you can play X speed or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're able to retreat off of the only energy that you've been using to attack all game. But that's like kind of implying you don't have Graveler, so maybe not. It might not be particularly useful all that often, but saving energies in play is also nice. But if you're definitely gonna have some Pokemon that you're looking to attack with the early game that you're not looking to attack with late game, and they'll be in the active, but X Speed is definitely a good item card, one that I'd recommend you play probably at least 1 copy of in every deck, but certainly playing the second copy could provide good value as well. X Speed is definitely going to be an item card that you want to play often, but it's not like as good as Pokeball, Professor's Research, things like that. But overall, the trainers are something that are really important that you cannot overlook in Pokemon. It's just really, really, it's really crucial. So what's this mean? Okay, hand scope in Pokédex are kind of weird. Red card's definitely a card that we'll need to kind of wait to see. Once I start playing the game, red card could pop out to be like a really broken card or just some card that doesn't have a lot of value. But overall, there's some really cool cards from the set, and I'm excited to play them when it comes out. And as I said, there might be, in I don't know if this video or a previous video, there might be new cards to the set, or more likely another set when the game fully releases. But I hope you enjoyed the video. Consider liking, subscribing, hitting the bell, all that good stuff. And as always, I'm excited to see you in the next video.